This is TV Podcast Industries. We're back talking about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 2, Cut and Run.
I'm sorry. I was trying to get the ball. I didn't know.
You're safe. That's all that matters. Come on.
Hey, kid. You alright?
She'll be fine. All in all, I would say that could have gone much worse. Tech, you think you can forge some chain codes? I only learned of them moments ago. But yes, do it. We're getting Cut, Suu, and the kids on that shuttle.
Welcome back, fellow troopers, to TV Podcast Industries. We're talking about Star Wars The Bad Batch, Episode 2, Cut and Run. I'm one of your hosts, Derek, and laughing beside me is another one of my hosts.
Hello there, fellow troopers. I am one of your other hosts, John.
I have genuinely had to re-record that 4 times because John has laughed over every single one. But we also have our excellent third host with us as well.
Yes, I smelt it, and I did dealt it, and I cut and run. Is that the way? I'm assuming that's what they're talking about when they're saying it's basically one of the troopers farted and then ran away.
Got caught in his helmet.
Yes,
he's struggling to take his helmet off so he can breathe again.
Yes, I am Chris. Hello.
Welcome back. Yes, Chris unfortunately couldn't join us for the pilot episode of The Bad Batch, but he is all caught up. He's watched episode 1 and 2. What do you think of the first episode of Bad Batch, Chris?
Definitely interesting. I am coming from this as someone who has never watched any of the animated Star Wars universe, watched all the films, all of the Disney Plus shows. By that I mean The Mandalorian season 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Sorry, to clarify.
And the making of.
Yeah, and the making of. But I've never watched Rebels or the original Clone War animated or any of those seasons. Not for any other reason than just time.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Chris, are you so young that the prequels 1, 2, and 3 are your Star Wars?
I suppose you could technically... No, I am 35, so technically I grew up on the original, so 4, 5, 6, as my original trilogy. Yeah. But while I was of age, 1, 2, 3 did come out, but my trilogy will always be 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
You can stay.
And I like this. This is a good reason to have Chris on board here, is he does represent Star Wars fans who are always told for years, no, you should watch the Clone Wars. They're really good. No, you should watch Rebels. You have to make up time for those, 10 seasons of TV. Watch all of those shows. And he just didn't get the time.
Yeah, I guess primarily by us.
Well, eventually.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, we burned through them, most of the last couple of seasons. We burned through them in, last year.
Yeah, well. Lockdown was,
awesome.
Certainly how we got through Rebels.
Absolutely.
And I think like most of these, Star Wars animated features, it kind of always started off with, okay, these are really well done. It's really good. But there was a lot of watching it and then looking at the phone, and then watching it and then looking at the phone, and just as the series progressed, and then as the series and as you move into the next seasons, then they really built momentum.
You realize you're not looking at your phone as much.
Yeah, exactly. You really build momentum on
And John doesn't mean Googling characters. He means not paying full attention to the episodes.
Checking bank balances.
Exactly. Like suddenly you go, I've gone through about 12 episodes of this. Not a huge amount happened, but I'm kind of liking it. And then you get onto more seasons that get more in depth. So I would assume that this show will follow a similar trajectory as we go. But we will be talking about each individual episode in spoiler-filled detail as we go through them. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can subscribe to it over on tvpodcastindustries.com, where we talk about tons and tons of different shows. This is our show filling in between our 2 live-action Marvel series, Falcon the Winter Soldier and Loki. Loki will be coming out over on Disney Plus as well in June. So this is the one filling in between those 2 shows, right?
Yes. And Loki's going to be good. And for first time ever, we are going for Wednesday.
I'm so happy about
it's
that.
the new Friday, so we should all have a drink in hand.
Well, absolutely. We're starting drinking on Wednesdays. That's definitely lockdown talking.
Yes.
It's like 50s are the new 40s.
Oh, yeah, that's what it will be soon, John. It will be. This episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch was written by Gursimran Sandhu. Gursimran was an assistant on Game of Thrones and worked her way into being a staff writer for the final season of Game of Thrones and is now working on Star Wars The Bad Batch. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a
career path.
Interesting path for sure. Yes, I was expect more sort of dragons and ravenous Rottweiler dogs at Winterfell.
Well, yeah, let's hope they don't make it into the Bad Batch. Remember, kids show, probably can't have dogs eating kids on this show. But the episode was directed by Steward Lee, one of the directors of episode 1, as we mentioned before. I mentioned he's worked on all of the Star Wars animated shows. But John, thanks to Wikipedia, do you want to give us your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. The Bad Batch and Omega arrive on Saleucami to meet with the deserter Cut Lawquane and his wife Sue. Cut reveals the existence of the inhibitor chips inside the clone troopers' brains, explaining why the clones have turned against the Jedi. While Cut and Hunter go into town, the rest of the Bad Batch stay behind with Sue, and Omega bonds with Cut and Sue's children. Cut reveals to Hunter that he plans to leave off-world with his family, but with the Empire now ruling over the galaxy, a newly established law states that civilians need a chain code to legally book a transport. Back at Sue's house, Omega accidentally throws a ball outside a restricted fence, grabbing the attention of a monster, but is rescued by Sue. To get the chain codes, Tech and Echo devise a plan to infiltrate the ship impound to retrieve them, but accidentally bring Omega along and get caught. Omega delivers the chain codes to Cut and his family, however 5 are made rather than the original 4, with the 5th chain code made specifically for Omega. As Hunter explains, it is too dangerous for her to be with him and the rest of the Bad Batch. Despite this, Omega chooses to stay with the Bad Batch while Cut and his family manage to flee.
The way we're talking about our episodes is our main bullet points, or because we're in the Star Wars universe, our blaster points for the episodes. Well done, John, for coming up with that one.
Why, thank you.
Overall, a reasonably straightforward episode. As we mentioned before, these shows are aimed towards kids, unlike Invincible, where we had people's heads being ripped off almost every episode. That doesn't tend to happen in these shows. So a pretty straightforward storyline this time. We have the Bad Batch on the run, going to visit someone that might be able to give them some information about how to keep on the run, I suppose. So our first major point is they're all deserters now.
Yes, they certainly are. It's one big dessert in the Star Wars universe.
Uh-huh.
Are they tiramisu? Different layers, spongy bits, bit of caffeine, and
definitely different layers. All 5 of the Bad Batch all have a very different personality about them. As well.
So more of a trifle then.
Something like that.
Let's hope not.
But they do meet up with Cut Lawquane, as you mentioned in the notes, and his wife Sue and the 2 kids on the planet. Cut is another one of the clones, another one with a very different personality. Previously had run away from the clones for this relationship with his wife Sue. I wanted to point this out because we mentioned before we know a lot of our listeners haven't been watching the Clone Wars, and Chris, you mentioned as well that you haven't watched the Clone Wars. I feel they're really making it out as if Cut was a major character that we were expecting to see on the planet. We mentioned at the end of last episode, they say they want to go to the planet J19 because they're looking to find a friend that can support them, and we had no idea who this could possibly be. And even when revealed on screen, we had no idea who this character was because he was in one episode of Clone Wars back in season 2. That show was 7 seasons long, and he was in one episode, season 2, episode 10. So we did not recognize him when he was here. But his storyline, as told in that episode, is he ran away. He was a deserter from the Clone Army, tried to be brought back by one of the main characters, Captain Rex, but left there on the planet with his wife and kids.
Yeah. Dare I say it, I may have been doing some banking on the phone at that moment. But yeah, it's one of those things, if it had been Rex from the Clone Wars, then, this would potentially have a different spin on how the episode goes. But still, it is the fact that Cut was a deserter, and with the Bad Batch, with Tech, Wrecker, Hunter, and Echo, along with Omega now, having, escaped from Camino in the last episode, that they're also on the run. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I guess deep down, this is the for me, the fluffy family episode. This is the idea of, two families, one being the family of the military, the other one, a regular family settled down at the homestead, the farmstead, and all that. And, you get that kind of nice little crossover that Hunter has to realize that Omega is not from the Bad Batch. She hasn't gone on missions. We see her in awe at Soil.
Yeah.
It's her first time off planet from Camino.
First time anywhere, John.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In terms of seeing space after they escaped from Camino, and now coming into this world of Saleucami, it really is her sort of being sort of blasted with all these different sensations, I guess. So there's that element, but at the same time, it's that Hunter needs to learn how to treat her as a kid, ultimately, or a child. Give her that sort of feel, really.
Exactly.
Two aspects that you talked about there. First being Omega and her innocence to the world. I do like that because I think she will act as a good anchor point for some people like me who are not aware of who these people are, what is going on. And you kind of see that joy or innocence when the dirt moment.
Absolutely.
I thought it was very cute. It was...
Yeah, like with the ball, what am I supposed to do with this? As one of the kids turns around and say, well, you catch it with your hands.
Yeah.
It's that kind of, Camino must be pretty sterile place to be as a child, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then to Derek's point, Omega's a good anchor point, but at the same time, I also have so far in this episode and the previous episode kind of, I know you said this person wasn't actually even a big character. Cut wasn't. Mm-hmm. My assumption was this was a major reveal and a huge thing for previous Clone Wars viewers or Rebels viewers, like the Jedi in the first episode, the Jedi kid, the Padawan who turned out to was in Rebels. I know that from the internet.
Yeah.
But
no, you knew that from listening to our podcast, Chris, right?
That too.
The internet doesn't have any of this information, just
No. But this is the thing. The way the reveal came, it was like, oh, it's cut, and I'm like,
right,
cool. Could have given us a tiny bit more,
yeah.
Just a bit more of that kind of Basil exposition, kind of like, yeah, well, Cut, how have you been since our exploits and blah 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 blah? When you did this, and it was that one step removed problem.
Well, do you know what's even weirder about it? And just again point this out, the Bad Batch only appeared in season 7 of the show, and Cut only appeared in season 2, episode 10. So even the conversations where Sue says, there's some new people here, we've never seen them on screen together. So every single one of their interactions are completely new. So they're effectively just telling the audience that they have some pre-existing relationship, but it's not on screen. It's not available in the Clone Wars series. So don't go looking for it. It's a very long series, unless you're willing to watch the whole series, and you still won't find it. They haven't had that relationship, but I know what you mean, Chris. They are setting it up. They're trying to create this bigger world, I suppose. But it's like revisiting a character from a very early season for the audience. So I wonder what happened to that person. Did they ever get caught? Did they ever get captured by the clones and brought back after being released by Rex? It's a little bit of a tie-up for fans of the Clone Wars, but doesn't actually make a difference to the episode itself.
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is one of those things where, will this just be Cut and his wife and his 2 kids for this episode, and we don't really get to see them again? Mm-hmm. Or is it something, and not really as such to the same extent, but, are Star Wars, is Lucasfilm, are these things, just because we were talking about how, tying certain things from the animation into the live action, like The Mandalorian, and vice versa, that is being done. And also the fact that, there's certainly this call for Ezra, hopefully, to be in The Mandalorian and so on from Rebels. But is it almost that, potentially, just potentially, Cut Lawquane could be Agatha Harkness, this kind of real small B-list kind of element of the original Clone Wars that just over time, I'm not saying that's not in the same way, but just gets pulled to the fore of the Bad Batch. There's nothing in this to suggest that he will be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there is that potential for how they take characters
absolutely
to bring into this,
and what makes it
so which is quite interesting.
And what makes it really easy for the show, of course, is again voiced by the same actor who does all of the clones, so very easy to be brought back if they do want to bring it back in the future. But overall, on the story here that they have to escape from the planet, it's a bit of an interesting one, because I was kind of going, they're having a lot of challenges here with the Lawquane family trying to leave the planet by getting all of their these new chain codes created for them so that they can pass through the Empire, and then you're kind of going, doesn't Hunter give them an out pretty early on? Goes, why don't you just get aboard our ship and we can leave? And then you're kind of going, they could have dropped them off at the next planet, somewhere like that. But they go through the whole process of getting the chain codes and getting them off planet and having a big battle with all the clone troopers. Okay, I know they do pay attention to it. Cut does say, it's really dangerous for my family to be with you. You're on the run. We're not going to do it. But I feel like they could have taken them off and put them on another planet.
I completely understand that. That would be like being in the middle of a bank robbery, like queuing up to get to the counter. The bank robbers come in, and then you go, could you mind giving me a lift to, I need to go to the supermarket next. And it's like, no, there's too much of a risk. I mean, Cut is clear enough that he's been told they're on the run.
Yeah.
That their spaceship will be flagged under the, I mean, if the Galactic Empire is now tracking people and asking people to change all their money for galactic credits, then, it's too much of a risk when he's got two kids. And that's kind of I think, quite normal.
It just felt like a similar risk to forge your identity in order to get off planet as hopping on board a ship that could take you off in 5 minutes.
But he wasn't the one doing it, was he? So the risk was still on the Bad Batch, and they were willing to take that risk to do it for him. So
yeah,
I could see that. But you're right. They ultimately could have just all gotten into the ship and gone off. And in which case the episode would have been 10 minutes long, and we wouldn't have had the great ship impound battle with the Bad Batch.
The one thing I'll actually on this is yes, 100%. That ran through my head, which is like, after the first trip to the village, I think you could have just, look, it's too risky. Let's just take you to the next planet and we'll go from there. That I thought was one that did run through my head multiple times, and that's when Derek was saying those points, I had my fingers crossed because I was like, please say the exact same thing. I was thinking, yes, it is exactly the same thing. But to John's point, it would have been a 10-minute episode. Beyond that, it is interesting. This is a point in history I never thought I'd really enjoy, which is post Order 66, but early post Order 66, where you're starting to see, like, essentially this, like the universal codes for not just the chain codes, not for just ships, but people. Yeah. And the way people are just like, oh, okay, this is strange. And the propaganda that they had in the village, which is a guy in an officer's uniform on a hologram saying how good this is for the Empire and its population. Yeah. It's something I never thought would be an interesting point of view, or a setting. In my head, it's like the Trade Federation in Phantom Menace. It's a bit like, oh, that's a bit strange. Oh, we're going to spend like 10-hour deliberations in the Senate. Yeah. Let's do it.
Do you know what was so interesting, Chris, that is blaster point number 2, talking about the Galactic Empire and the kind of creation and this initial point of them? Because effectively, in this series, they were only created last episode. We had the Emperor announcing the Galactic Empire to the galaxy, obviously, and shutting down the Republic. And here we see some of the tools that they're using, exactly as you say, Chris, the propaganda that they're using in the town, the idea of everybody bringing in their old currency, which is useless now. You don't need any of that money that you used to have. Just give us all your ID, give us all your identity, give us everything about you, and we'll give you the equivalent in this newly created currency, the Republic credits, which is a really interesting mechanism. This is done in real world as well. I was speaking to a colleague of mine who lives in India, where she was saying that they changed currency in India a few years ago. Not the rupee, they removed some elements of the currency from
like different denominations.
Different denominations, exactly, from people's hands, in order to bring back in a lot of money that was being held by different criminal organizations. And suddenly a lot of money was wiped off the boards that criminal organizations were holding in their hands, which was previously real money and was being wiped off the board. And in the same way here, we have this new galactic empire coming in and effectively wiping currency off the board and saying you can only use this new currency if you sign up to us and give us all your details. So I thought that was quite interesting.
I think the good thing about it is it kind of plays out in the background and with the arc of what is happening to Cut and to the Bad Batch. It's not like suddenly having, you know, the big political debate in the Senate.
Well, exactly.
In episodes 1, 2, or 3,
which is the Trade Federation thing that Chris was talking about.
Or just the whole. I mean, that was just like, oh my goodness! It's like a socio-political history of the Republic.
And it's something that 55-year-old George Lucas, when making those films, was much more interested in was when he was 30 making Star Wars. You know, it's something our 60-year-old George Lucas wasn't much more interested in. But here we're seeing with the Empire, it's seeing, dare I say, it's more insidious, or maybe just Darth Sidious than we've seen in the past. It is a fascinating period, though, Chris. You know, this is where a lot of stories take place in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. This is where, you know, Rogue One, which is probably one of the best Star Wars movies, took place. This is the period where the video game that came out, the PlayStation and Xbox game that came out with Cal Kestis in it, that's where this period is exactly the time, just after Order 66, these escaped Jedis trying to survive in the galaxy. And now here, in this show, we have some escaped clones almost, and how they survive in the galaxy. So I do like that. And again, another one of the things that's kind of in the background here is seeing, these are the clone troopers that we followed as our almost heroes in the Clone Wars. And these same characters that we're seeing in this episode now working for the Empire are pushing around the little people. They're telling them, you know, you can't get aboard this ship that you paid your money to get on board because the rules have changed. They're pushing people to the ground. They're telling them they need to rearrange everything. They need to now follow these brand new rules that are in there. So this is a massive change if you watched those characters for all of the Clone Wars to see all these clones being really pushy.
Definitely. I must say I did like the kind of wink, wink, nod, nod, response from Tech. Not only sort of within the Bad Batch, but also, I guess to just shows, TV shows, animated shows in general, where they're looking to get the chain code, forgeries done for Cut and his family. Where he's like, I've only just seen the technology, but I believe I can hack it, you know, just like that. Yeah. I thought that was a nice little bit of self-awareness of these types of storylines and how it can be done. So I really like that point. And I thought, despite all this galactic snooping and you know, listening in and getting all these details, I thought it was interesting that when Cut and his family went up to board with the forgeries, he still had this huge hat on his head that basically covered his face. I was like, okay, you know, it just really, I thought the clone trooper, like anyone at security, I mean, you get asked to take your glasses off at airport security, let alone a massive, like, English cottage garden hat, that just like flopping over his eyes. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Like, he's completely in shadow. Like, I know this is in a galaxy far, far away, a very, very long time ago, but surely they've had some kind of security procedures in the past. Yeah. Take off your hat, sir, so we can see your face.
And I mean, is it like looking in the mirror for
there is a moment,
clone?
There is a moment when the clone trooper does recognise
Cut
and kind of goes, hang on a second, you look like, but all of them have different haircuts.
Yeah. And he probably went, I would never have a top knot.
Oh, yes, that's true.
I think he has a top knot or a side bun or something like that, just Cut.
That's true. One other thing I did like in the episode, actually, there's two kind of Star Wars references that I really liked in this episode. The chain codes themselves, this idea of all of the members of the Empire now, all of the civilian members of the Empire now have to give chain codes. This is used in Mandalorian. Do you guys remember in that Mando, when he gets his contracts that he's supposed to go out, he's given chain codes as his way of finding the person that he's going to find, basically. That's the code that he's given. So I was like, oh wow, that's really interesting. That's the chain code that he's looking for Baby Yoda initially. And
it can literally track you. Like,
pretty much,
you know?
It tracks you within certain distance. So this is effectively the creation of that. I thought that was quite a good little background piece. And the other one I liked is just that Echo, the character that is the new member of the Bad Batch for this season, effectively. I really love that he's got effectively R2D2's communication device attached to one of his hands, so he's able to interface with all the computers the way that R2D2 always did in the Star Wars trilogy.
And I guess the reason it looks like a flathead screwdriver rather than a Phillips head screwdriver is just there's way too many rights issues to be able to put that on the screen.
No, it's R2D2's.
I know it is, but it looks more like a screwdriver. It feels like that arm could be like a Swiss Army knife.
Maybe.
It is, but I also feel really sorry for Moore's Law must have completely gone out the window in the Star Wars universe, because it's the same compatibility device for the last 70 years across the Star Wars. There's always the same port. If you think about this, how many USBs have we had in the last 10 years? A, B, C. We're on USB-C now.
See, Chris, we didn't have a galactic empire aligning everybody and saying this is how you must create a USB.
True. Yes, standardized authoritarian regime.
There's one good thing about Galactic Empire. We wouldn't need to have 7 different types of USB connections in our home. That was basically it about the Galactic Empire this episode. Anything else that stood out to you guys from the episode?
I like the fight again at the impound, where, you know, you've got Wrecker and you've got Echo trying to take off the magnetic clamps that are keeping it impounded.
Yeah.
And where you see his USB arm not working in this case, with Wrecker coming in and, bullying a China shot Wrecker, just ripping it apart. Absolutely. But, you know, a little blaster back and forth at the impound whilst Cut and his wife get off to safety. But also, interestingly, that we have the 5 chips and Hunter is there prepared to let Omega go with Cut so that she effectively has a childhood in a sense, you know, coming back to that conversation that Hunter has to learn that he can't treat her like a soldier.
Yeah.
But it's also the point that, well, does she want to be, or, you know, that she actually wants to be a soldier because she comes back to them. And I guess there's that affinity. And but I quite like the fact that she said, well, I chose you. I thought it was quite simple. I mean, you know, I think at the time we were going, well, how come Cut didn't try and stop her, you know, as she's running into a blaster fire sort of central. But like,
it wasn't that he didn't even stop her. That wasn't what I was saying when we were watching the episode. I was kind of going, there's no reaction shot from Cut, Suu, or the kids that this person that they're supposed to be taking care of for the rest of her life has disappeared and gone back. They're not even going, oh, okay, let her go or anything. They're just, they go, oh, damn it. They'll arrive on the new planet and go, hang on a second. Where's Omega gone?
It's that Home Alone Kevin McAllister moment. Yeah. Kevin! Omega!
Exactly.
That was all.
But I kind of like that she ultimately wanted to be with the Bad Batch.
Yeah,
and of course,
if you're a child in a kid's cartoon show, of course you're going to want to go ahead with the Bad Batch. Of course, there was no way we were getting rid of Omega in the second episode. It's not going to be possible.
Not given the fact that, you know, her origin in Camino as a clone, but the clone of who? Because obviously she doesn't look like one of the clone troopers. And also just the potential for her to be, force sensitive in some way.
A clone of a Jedi, perhaps, yeah.
Or the female clone of the clones. A female version.
Well, absolutely.
Of Jango Fett. It would be it's his clone. So yeah, I thought she was the female. I didn't think about the Force sensitive. I didn't actually take that. I took that as like her skills, training kicking in that's been bred into her.
But it's still a working theory, basically.
Yes, it's all working theories. She could be a clone of. She could be a female clone of Darth Sidious.
Yeah,
she absolutely could be a female clone of Palpatine. Yes,
yeah, she could. I mean, at the moment, she can't catch a ball, but she can wield the blaster pretty competently.
Yeah, exactly.
So, speaking of blasters, blaster point number 3, gentlemen. Let's move it on.
Just one call out to make, because I wasn't sure whether we were going to hear about Captain Rex in the show. It's just a conversation that's had between the Bad Batch and Cut when they first meet, that Rex has been to this planet, has had a similar conversation with Cut, saying things are going a bit weird here with the clone army. They all seem to have followed this order to turn on their Jedi leaders, killing them all, and now he's gone again. So here we go. This is our setup for the season. The Bad Batch will effectively meet up with the central clone from the Clone Wars series. They're going to follow up and find Rex at some point throughout this series. That was something that I definitely wanted to call out because it's just a conversation, but especially because Cut gives them no information as to where he's gone, so it's not their mission to go off and find him, but they will find him, I think, at some point in the series. It's interesting to know that we have that character out there.
Agree. I think that the aim... The whole aim of this series for me is to a degree, tell everyone where these characters... So the lingering question a lot of people have for Rebels and for this show and the previous Clone Wars is, where were all these characters in A New Hope? Where were they by the end of A New Hope? Like where that starting off point? Because Disney and previously Lucasfilm have introduced all these different characters. Most of them, some of them now are Legends characters, so no longer canon. But the Clone Wars and the Bad Batch and all those kind of are. So it's interesting to see where by the end of this season, or season 2, wherever they kind of put it, it's like, okay, who's alive, who's dead? Like, where are we getting to? Because at some point you're going to have like, all right, the Bad Batch are going to the unknown. We're going to go past the great unknown, the element or sectors, so that they don't come back for episode 5 or 4 or 6, things like that.
I like that you did that in reverse order, Chris.
Yes.
I like it. Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is the thing. When you're creating a galaxy of characters, you want to make sure that some of them can stay in the periphery and don't need to come into the central storyline for the shows. So, it's really good to see that. On that point, kind of my last thing to say about the episode, I just wanted to point it out. We mentioned in our coverage of the first episode that this is really looking very similar to Clone Wars Season 8. As opposed to just Bad Batch Season 1. It felt like it was really connected to Clone Wars. Last episode, the mention of Captain Rex in here, of course, is a connection directly to Clone Wars. But no more voiceover guy. We've had voiceover guy introducing all the episodes of Clone Wars, telling us which battle they're at, what's going on from last time on the previous episode, and now we don't have him opening up the new episodes. That was a weird moment when it just kind of felt more like Star Wars Rebels, actually, where we had it just going straight into the animated show with no voiceover, no battle, no planet name that we're on.
Yeah,
it just goes
absolutely.
straight into the story. So just to mark his disappearance, I suppose.
Yes, R.I.P. newscaster for the Old Republic.
There you go.
I didn't even know I missed you.
Oh, exactly. He was there in the first episode, Chris.
Yeah, I know. I got that, but I didn't know that was a thing.
Anything else from you guys about the episode?
Nothing on my side.
No, nothing really from my side.
Excellent. Well, do you defend? Did you like the Bad Batch episode 2, Cut and Run?
I did. I mean, I thought it was, I think you get this with the animations. I know episodes like this were, and it's certainly transitionary, they need to find out a lot of stuff, which they did, such as Cut having spoken to Rex about the inhibitor chip, learning more about why Order 66 happened, possibly more about why Crosshair behaved the way he did, learning more about themselves as a group now that they've got Omega tagging along, and just seeing sort of the developments within this newly formed galactic empire. So, yeah, for me, this is 3 chain codes out of 5. Really, a nice kind of more of a, I guess, family orientated, the family of the Bad Batch and the Lawquane families, sweetie.
You're not giving them our 3 chain codes, are you? It's just a random 3 chain codes that you give this.
It is just a random 3 chain codes.
I do not agree. I do not agree. Chris, what did you think about this episode?
This very much reminds me of the late 80s G.I. Joe Transformers, where there's always a...
Wow.
You're expected to know some of these characters from previous, but if you haven't watched all the other episodes or seasons, you're kind of like, okay, cool. But there's actually, like you said, this character was in one episode like 6 seasons ago. It's not this long-running character, which they kind of, to a degree, kind of has. So for me, I enjoy it for what it is. It's a fun romp, and like they arrive, there's a plot point, they solve the plot point, and they go on to another planet.
There you go.
I'm assuming this is what a lot of this is going to be, and for what it is, it's good fun. They do need to either dial up the wink wink nudge nudge, which is, hey, this character, hey, do you remember why this person's important? Here's why, and give me that exposition, or delve more into this place where none of us have gone, which is this timepiece, this setting, and really dive into, okay, we've given you a bit of your nostalgia from previous Clone Wars. This is all new now. New characters, like Dave Filoni being Dave Filoni, introducing his Ahsoka, these new characters that will become huge, characters unto themselves, to the point where the overall fandom is like, yeah, we want Rosario Dawson, being to play this live action version. That's kind of what we need. Yeah. So for me, very much along with John, it's actually probably a bit less. So it's 2 to 3, 2/3 out of 5 kind of.
Hey, let's go for 2.5.
2.5. There you go. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I think there's a fine episode. Absolutely nothing wrong with it as such. It feels like what I would expect from the show where we are. We're 2 episodes in. We had a movie this week over an hour long, and we have this as our 2nd episode. I'm looking forward to seeing more, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the purpose of the show overall will be.
Yeah, exactly.
Will it be them being chased down by the Empire, which it doesn't feel right now that they are. It just feels like they're on the run, but nobody actually chasing them. Do you know what I mean? It's like we can't be seen by the clone troopers because they have our identity, but we're not seeing somebody following them all the time like we did in Rebels.
Exactly.
So I'm hoping we get a bit more of that. But I think you did need that moment of just solidifying the Bad Batch themselves, our 4 old members plus Omega, now saying we're together and we're going on our travels now, I suppose. So looking forward to the next episode. Thanks, guys. Let's get on to some feedback for these episodes. Over on Facebook, Dr. Bob Phillips said, just started into your episode 1 podcast and already delighted, as usual, that we're being treated to the engaging, informative and wonderfully positive fill-in and analysis you bring to the podcasts. Thanks, Bob.
Excellent stuff.
I enjoyed it. Yeah.
And then I came along.
Not at all. Not at all. I was going to say, we don't say this often enough on the podcast that we do choose the shows that we podcast about. We aren't reviewers. We choose things that we hope we're going to enjoy, and we come at them from a place of enjoyment, really. So hopefully we can add to your experience of enjoying the show you're watching, because the last thing you want to do is be watching a show that you're enjoying and then turn on a podcast and have people whining about it for half an hour and why it's not the best thing in the world.
Absolutely. This is quite dangerous for us, actually, because we haven't had any screeners for it, and it's weekly, so we have no idea where and how this is going. It's purely on the basis of where Clone Wars and Rebels went, and it's Dave Filoni, and we're trusting in his storytelling and magic.
It's not an unknown quantity, though, we'll say.
No, that's true.
Yeah, we're not randomly picking up a show on Netflix that we've never seen before and trying to.
That is true. There's something very soothing about the angular cheekbones and chin of the animation style for me.
Yes, we have had screeners before. We have watched them, and unfortunately, we just didn't want to. Like Derek said perfectly, it's that we don't want to be the Debbie Downer. We don't want to be the Debbie Downer of the podcast world. If you want that type of podcast,
there are hundreds of them.
Hundreds. We are the happy podcast. We will tell you what we love about certain things. Will we always defend it? No, not always, but we will always tell you the truth.
And we'll call out the things we don't like, of course, as well. But thanks so much, Bob. Bob also says on episode 2, he watched this episode this morning, says, I'm hoping we get a full fashion breakdown this episode, as I feel John Harrison may have views on broad-brimmed hats, ponchos, and Wolverine-esque mutton chop sideburns. Plus, here's proof that blockchain is connected with the banality of evil, and that wheel clamps are a totalitarian innovation. I like that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I didn't go full fashion breakdown on this, I don't think, but certainly, yes, the broad brimmed hat of Cut was certainly giving, as I say, some English cottage garden realness. It's kind of something I would expect. I guess a recently retired person somewhere in the home counties around London who lives or Yorkshire in a small village in a nice cottage would be out pruning her sort of perennials and annuals in. And I guess Cut was doing a bit of farming, so he kind of did need that. But then, of course, underneath that, you had the radness that was his top knot. And also the kind of sort of older look of the mutton chops, I guess. So, yeah. Cut is an enigma from a fashion point of view for me, I think.
This is what I always wanted. Who knew? A fashion breakdown on individual fashion choices by the Star Wars universe.
There you go.
I want to see you break down like the red guard. Kind of go, too much red. Let's put a bit of gold in there. Sequence some Swarovski crystals.
Weirdly, those are John's favourite minor characters in all Star Wars.
I know.
Yeah. I have a statue of one of the Imperial Red Guards.
I feel like Chris could actually see that through the Zoom, but thanks so much for your feedback, Dr. Bob. Also over on Facebook, Dan Lee says, ups and downs with this episode. I enjoyed seeing Omega's first taste of the outside, flashbacks to when I finally left the house after lockdown, and it's interesting to see how quickly the Empire has made life for everyday people so oppressive. However, I get the feeling that some of the impact of this episode was lost on me as I haven't watched the Clone Wars, had to do a bit of Googling to see who Cut is, for example.
Right there with you, Dan.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that a little bit in the episode. I think the only other thing here is because, again, you know, Captain Rex being such a central character in the Clone Wars, him being a central character in this show may mean you need to watch the Clone Wars. We don't know yet. But him being mentioned here and him possibly being someone that we'll meet in the future. He's a clone. He's going to come across as being a big character, of course, but that might have been the other moment in the show that you might felt, why are they talking about this person Rex? I have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's me hoping we would have got Cut's Corner. We also got some feedback from Donald Dennis, who said, finish watching the first episode and this one as well. The second episode felt better made than the first. I'm still not in love, but I found it alright if I only got partial attention paid.
It's mobile phone banking.
Yeah.
I think the characters were more in themselves and less trying to show just how different clones can be. I got more used to the animation style, but the kids all felt creepy and uncomfortable. I think that's just children in general. That's personal opinion. Children are creepy and uncomfortable.
There is something actually that Donald Dennis has said there about the kids that felt creepy and uncomfortable, and whether it's the kind of angularness of the animation for the children, and because it's also a bit in their motion, you know, it's just the style of it. Yeah. So it seems slightly unnatural sometimes, but with Donald Dennis saying that, there's something about Omega as well that suddenly came to mind where I'm like going, this is the Midwich Cuckoos. And it's, and certainly with the stars, twinkling in her eyes, it kind of feels like it's the blonde haired, sort of, you know, silver eyes, gold eyes of, the Midwich Cuckoos from, the John Wyndham novels. So I get that for sure. And to be honest, yes, only paid partial attention must mean on the mobile phone, like I had as well at the start. It is definitely one of the things I think about these. It's kind of that comfort element for me anyway.
Something general, and if something suddenly pops up that you go, oh, what was that? Exactly. You can rewind it and catch that bit. Definitely, yeah. I like that a lot. Do you know, someone pointed out this week to me, and I don't know why, after 7 seasons of Clone Wars and 4 seasons of Rebels, someone only pointed out to me this week that the style that's used is effectively like as if they're wooden characters carved.
That's it.
And painted.
Like Pinocchio
type of characters. And when I heard it after the first episode, watched the second episode, and I was like, that's exactly the style. They're like wooden puppets, like.
Yeah.
I never got that before. There you go. Thanks so much to everybody for your feedback.
Yeah, thanks so much, Donald and Dan, and of course, Bob as well. I hope I gave you that full fashion breakdown for Cut in particular.
We got a last minute bit of feedback in from Richard Blaze. He says, it's good, but not the dizzying heights of the Clone Wars yet. Both versions. Thought the first was dragged out a bit too long, but enjoyed the second a lot more. I suppose there's a possibility they'll run into Darth Maul at some point, as if I remember he's on the run. Sticking with it, as they tend to improve with time, so hoping for the best for this show.
Absolutely. Well said, Richard. Yes, they are improvers. They really are, the animated series. I think that's basically has always been the case for me.
Yeah.
And that would be, it would be great to have Darth Maul in there. He is on the run as well after the final kind of season of Clone Wars.
Yeah. And if I remember rightly, that character appeared in Solo, the Han Solo film. Gosh, that's so difficult to say. He appeared right at the end of that. So he is still out there at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting. I know Maul from some of the other more well-known properties, like Phantom Menace. But that's about all I know. I know he's alive. That's to my extent of knowledge.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Thanks so much for that, Richard. Glad we were able to fit that bit of feedback in before we closed out the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
Yes, thank you so much.
And one final bit of feedback that I just got as I was editing the episode. Deanna Maskell says, still loving this series. I'm really thinking about the many ways this episode explores the issue of free will, from Hunter trying to make decisions for Omega to the inhibitor chips to the chain codes. Perhaps another play on the episode title, Cut and Run? Does it seem like the reg clones are less effective now than they are chipped? I don't think the episode was slow. I think the pacing was deliberate to allow us to appreciate this transition to a new world order. Still really intrigued to think about Omega's purpose. Thanks so much, Deanna, for sending in your feedback. That's really interesting feedback. Yeah, I think we talked a little bit about the differences now between the clones that we would have seen for 7 seasons of the Clone Wars and now them pushing people around. They do seem very different now that they're chipped as well. And I agree with you on the pacing, as we mentioned before, that these shows, especially at the beginning of a new show overall, not just a new season, they tend to run a little bit slower as they're setting everything up, and then it'll build up as the season goes on. So hopefully we're all still enjoying it in a couple of weeks' time. Thanks so much for your feedback, Deanna. If you want to send in any feedback to us, you can email us to feedback@tvpodcastindustries, or you can pop over to our website at tvpodcastindustries.com. There is a place to leave a voicemail there. We'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts about The Bad Batch as we're going through the rest of the season. We'll be back next weekend with a chat about Star Wars The Bad Batch Episode 3, which comes out next Friday.
Yes, and you can, of course, head on over to tvpodcastindustries.com, where you can like, subscribe, share, all those things, beautiful things with the podcast. You can also, of course, catch us on any Empire or Rebel affiliated networks. We would love your support if you want to head on over to patreon.com/tvpodcastindustries, where you can support us for $1 or a single credit. A galactic credit, if you will. Also, we are on buymeacoffee.com at buymeacoffee.com/TVPI, where the illustrious, you can essentially buy caffeine liquid hydration, which is also known as coffee, for our editor, Derek. Yes, we will be back, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks so much, fellow troopers, for joining us. It's a pleasure, as always. Remember, keep watching, keep listening, and keep trooping.
I still think that's like trooping the colour that you're going for there. I like it. See you soon. Bye.